My name's Matt Johnson. I'm the Chief Exec of Commercial Services Group. And today I'm going to be talking to us about the organisation, about CSG, and what we believe to be the important links and the important value back to the public sector. So a quick look at the agenda. This is really in two parts for me. So firstly, will be an introduction of CSG itself. So for those that don't know the organisation, what does the business do? What's its set up? And what are the brands and services that we provide to the sector and to the market? And then part two will be that part around, for us, what does strategic purpose and profit with a purpose mean, and how we believe that it supports and the role it plays in building the best possible public sector. So I'll talk at this stage about what we call our 4 pillars, so the core values that CSG operates within, as well as our strategic purpose and how we measure the impact that we have on the wider society. Okay, so to introduce commercial services. So firstly, I would describe the organisation as a relatively large commercial organisation. The first thing to understand is that the business is wholly owned by Kent County Council. So for me, this categorises CSG as a publicly owned, privately run organisation. And we genuinely believe that allows us to blend the very best of private enterprise and innovation with the very real purpose and the very real values of the public sector. Now, alongside Kent, we do operate and part own a number of joint venture organisations, public to public joint ventures. These are also with other local authorities, and I'll touch on that a bit later in my summary, and Helen will talk in more detail later today. But effectively, a privately run organisation governed by an independent board of directors, but wholly owned by the public sector. Within the group, we have 26 businesses at present. I'll share that my next slide will walk through these brands, but 26 businesses across 10 services, or what we call 10 trading divisions. There's quite a wide variety of services offered by CSG, but the DNA that runs through everything is that they are to support procurement and support services within local authorities and wider public sector. We provide those range of services currently to just over 16,000 customers. The largest proportion of that is local governments. That's followed by education, by health, by emergency services, and a small number of central government departments and arm's length bodies. But about 60% of CSG's customer base sits within local government, and a really important period, I think, for CSG to be able to continue to show support and value to that sector at such an extremely challenging financial time for everybody. Internally, we have about 1,800 staff in CSG, and we work with and are supported by a supply chain partnership of about 14,000 organisations. These organisations range from single person operations all the way through to large multinationals. And I'd imagine, like many organisations now, we are working hard through parts of our local economy and social value promise to ensure as much of that supply chain can stay in our respective local economies and local geographies as possible. And then finally, just in terms of scale, to give a flavour, the business generates about 800 million a year in revenue. Any surplus from that, which is I'll come to later when we talk about profit with a purpose, is effectively given back to frontline activity. And I think this is the stat that we're most proud of, is that so far CSG has contributed £67 million back through our dividends, so the annual payment that we give back to Kent and to our various joint venture partners. And I think that's the USP for CSG. It's being able to operate a very real and very credible commercial organisation across a wide range of services, but with a meaningful social value heart that is measured in so many ways that I'll come to later. But here's one of them: the fact that it's not for profit, but it's profit with a purpose, and this money makes obviously a very real difference to the sector. That's kind of the high-level introduction, just to give a very brief idea of who CSG are and the type of scale that we're working with. I mentioned that there's 26 trading brands in the group. These are those. Behind the scenes, like any organisation, we have the corporate centre or the shared service centre, and in CSG, that effectively provides people, culture and communication and HR support, finance support, operational support through areas like governance and risk, and technological and digital support. And we provide that to all of the trading brands and organisations in CSG. with the view that that allows them as much time as possible to really focus their attentions and their time on delivering frontline services and delivering the best possible service to customers that we can. I will canter through at some pace some of these. Now, I'm going to do this at a particularly high level. I'm mindful from colleagues on the call that some of these areas will be much more relevant than others. And as I said in the introduction, Helen, Nigel and Steve will go into a greater level of detail in some of these things later, particularly around the recruitment joint venture and the path to net zero. So I will touch on them briefly. We operate CSG across two portfolios, as you can see. Very, very loosely, strategic services are the businesses who tend to focus the majority of attention on wider public sector as opposed to education, whereas professional services tend to focus more on education as opposed to wider public sector. That's not exclusive. A number of the brands do cross over into both, but it's a useful way for us to operate the organisation from a perspective of tying together opportunity and customer demand. So to walk through these at some pace, we'll begin with our energy division, so energy and carbon. We have three trading brands there. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with some of these. Laser and Lumina provide large-scale energy management solutions to customers, to the public sector. We've been saving the sector in the hundreds of millions of pounds a year versus spot pricing, which we're very proud of. And in 2022, we acquired an organisation now branded as Zero Carbon Future, which was our entry into the solar and decarbonisation space. With that came a 96-acre solar farm that we now own and operate based out of Somerset. And we've been building a really important service to support customers on the drive to net zero, which is clearly such an important environmental and sustainability piece for us. Nigel's going to talk in some detail about that later, so I'm not going to go into it now, but division number one in CSG, which is energy management, provides that wide range of energy management services from traditional through to net zero, solar and carbon reduction. We then move to division number two, which is procurement. We have two businesses here. So the first, until recently, was branded KCS Procurement Services. Some of you may know that. We've recently rebranded that to Procurement Services. So that drops the KCS as the businesses have separated. And this organisation creates, manages and operates compliant framework solutions in order for public bodies to compliantly commission and work with private sector organisations. I think at last count, we operate about 55. It's due to be 80 by the end of the year. And those frameworks are created via demand, which is fed back to us from public sector partners. So I certainly won't go through all 55, but a very, very wide range that could run from IT managed solutions and software through to cleaning, catering, electric vehicle charging points, integrated community care systems, a very, very wide range of services. But everything's set up to ensure absolute compliance for the sector at, of course, the best possible price, because supply chain partners have to go through a rigorous tender process to be accepted onto those frameworks. And then in October last year, 2023, we acquired an organisation called Lifecycle Management. That's probably not going to be familiar to many people on this call, because Lifecycle are a contract management provider. So they effectively post-procurement manage the ongoing contracts for customers. But until now, it's been central. It's focused purely on the NHS. So manages about 4,000 NHS contracts. And the reason for us bringing that into CSG ownership was to link it to the procurement service business and offer that out to the wider public sector. So we're in the final stages of linking and aligning that business model now. It will be available to the markets in the next few months, and it will mean customers can not only now utilise CSG for their procurement activity, but for the ongoing contract management as well. And that's all done through a rather slick technological platform called Optimise, where you can self-serve and log into live data. So energy and carbon and procurement make up the first two. Thirdly, we come to recruitment managed services. Again, I'm not going to speak in great length here because Helen will be going into this in her presentation a little later. But this is where CSG's, I must say, rather innovative joint venture model exists. Some of you will be familiar with it. Some will not, but ultimately this is a service designed to better manage both compliantly, both from a control perspective and from a cost saving perspective, the near out of control spend on contingent labour and temporary labour. So our model is that we create public to public joint ventures. So CSG, through its public sector ownership with Kent and Partner X, move into a legal partnership, 50-50 control, where our partner organisation, as I said in my introduction, can enjoy the capability and the innovation of private enterprise, but actually retain the control, retain the compliance, retain the transparency, and of course enjoy 50% of any surplus that comes through. And there's no prizes for guessing the partners, but at the moment those joint ventures operate with Kent County Council, Hampshire, Luton, Surrey, Dudley and Dorset. Another is currently in mobilisation, not yet announced, but our first in the northwest of England. And this is a very important part of CSG for us, because geographically it expands the value that we're able to place into the sector far beyond our kind of original Kent borders, and allows other local authorities to enjoy not only the strength of the service, but obviously the financial and operational upsides that come with that as well. So more to come on that model later from Helen. And completing strategic services, we then have a couple of specialist recruitment brands. They do what they say on the tin, and they provide predominantly social work solutions into both our own joint ventures and via other frameworks. And then we have our community services department, which has two brands, one that looks after effectively soft service facilities management. That could range from landscaping to tree surgery to pest control. And we also operate a number of household waste recycling and transfer stations. So those businesses make up strategic services, quite diverse. You know, we have energy, we have procurement and contract management, we have recruitment, we have FM and we have waste. But ultimately, they're driven by the requirement and the demand that come from the public sector. And I'm sure there's many on the call that will be very familiar with some of those challenges around energy pricing. How do we procure better? How do we fix both our talent attraction and our vastly expensive temporary worker problem, as well as how do we keep frontline service activity looking as best as it possibly can for residents. So that makes up strategic services, which, as I said, is broadly facing into local government and wider public sector. We then move to professional services. This does broadly face into education, but it is very relevant for the call because we're not exclusive to education. A number of these businesses also provide services into local authorities and wider sector as well. And I'm sure some of the names will be familiar, but the way we operate them in CSG is slightly different. So firstly, we begin with IT. We have the Cantium Business Solutions, which came into CSG in 2022. Cantium is an IT provider. The services range from a full managed service, which it operates on behalf of a few local authorities, through to specialist, let's call it spots purchasing. So that may be expertise in areas like cybersecurity. It may be expertise in infrastructure or architecture, but effectively it's a pick and mix. You know, organisations can contract and commission the whole thing and effectively outsource IT, or they can ask for specific support on very niche parts of the organisation. We then have legal services, which is an organisation, currently just the one business in legal, which is an organisation called Invicta Law. Invicta are very, very niche and, in my opinion, very good at what they do, which is legal services, legal supports, all centred around child protection and community care. As I'm sure many colleagues will be familiar, sadly, this is an incredibly fast growing area of demand. Important that our organisation is able to keep pace with that, and important that geographically we're able to spread that support, because it is a service that is so important and has such an enormous impact on families and on real life, and it's one of the very reasons CSG exists. We have our the one just below Invicta Law there, where you can see the CSG brand. That's slightly different for us. This is where we effectively utilise our own internal shared service capability for other potential customers to utilise. So you may find a small organisation or one going through transformation that can't quite afford the requirements of shared back office solutions that it requires. Maybe it can't afford more accountants or HR expertise. So we do allow businesses to effectively utilise our own shared service, and we call that a service wrap, and that is provided into all of our joint ventures and is available for any other customer to utilise should that be required. And then penultimately, before we come to the final education brands, we have our integrated HR solutions, 5 brands here, led by HR Connect as the parent brand. HR Connect is generalist. You can get payroll and pension services, and then as well as HR advisory services, niche support on areas like grievances or employment law or 2P process. A bit like I said on IT, it's a pick and mix. Some organisations contract the whole thing and effectively outsource HR. Others just want support on very niche areas. And you may find it's an hour of someone's time, or it might be a permanently integrated member of the team. And then within HR Connect, we have a number of specialist sub-brands, Employment Check, which manages very large-scale DBS services, Staff Care Services, which manages, again, sadly, an incredibly fast-growing requirements around occupational health and mental health support services. We own the Kent Teach Job Board, which is a local Kent-based teaching job board to attract teachers into the area and into the profession. And we recently acquired a business called Prospects Payroll based just outside Birmingham, which is very similar to HR Connect and just allowed us to utilise and offer that skill set to a larger geography in the UK. And then finally, taking us to education, I'll skip across this as clearly for this audience, it's slightly less relevant, but we have a business called The Education People, which provides predominantly nurseries, primary and secondary schools with a wide range of operational education services. So this may include school improvements, it may include outdoor learning, it may include specialist employment and support with SEND. And then we have KCS and CES, which are effectively the retail arm. These are in old money catalogues, in new money e-commerce, where any kind of day-to-day product that you would find in a school, stationery, cleaning material, hygiene material, is all offered to markets. And there's about 20 to 25,000 products available to those businesses, both domestically and overseas. So always conscious of information overload, lots of info, but this kind of closes my part 1, which was really just a very high level summary on who is CSG and who are these people talking to us. So hopefully it's given an idea of the organisation. Hopefully people understand that this is a publicly owned, privately run institution, which allows us to merge that best practice of private enterprise and innovation with the social value heart and the true values of the public sector. Relatively large organisation to offer that level of support and scale that the sector needs, but small enough that we're still human beings and are able to have those personal relationships. And here, just a run through of those trading brands. And of course, if anybody would like any more information on these sectors, please reach out. I will say that there are many other organisations like CSG. Everyone in this space is trying to achieve the same thing, which is the best possible outcome for the sector, and to ensure that we can provide the commercial skill set, but with also that much wider value as well. And I think that will take me to part 2. So part 2 for me is, for us, what is strategic purpose? What does profit with a purpose mean? And actually, how and why, from a public sector perspective, is CSG any different to any other commercial organisation? And I think that's a really important question to answer. So firstly, I'll just speak around our internal model. So CSG operates on what we call 4 key pillars. You can see them on the screen: customer experience, social and sustainable value, commercial growth, and empowered workforce. These aren't gimmick statements. This is how CSG runs. So everything that we do internally, whether it's a policy, whether it is an investment opportunity, whether it's a new product or service coming to market, we always expect to be able to tick as many of these boxes as possible. Obviously, we want the best possible user experience for that end user, whoever that is, whether that's a commissioner in a local authority, whether that's the individual in a school using the product, whoever that end user is, we want to ensure the very best possible customer experience. And we want to be able to represent the public sector's commercial expertise as being, from an experience perspective, very much on a par with private sector competition. I'm going to skip the next and come to commercial growth. So obviously, as I've mentioned a few times, we are not a non-for-profit organisation. What we are is a profit with a purpose organisation. So the surplus that's generated from our various businesses and organisations is wholly passed back into the public purse. And I'll come to that on my final slide in a couple of minutes' time. We also operate on what we genuinely call and believe to be an empowered workforce. So this is important to us. We have about 1,800 staff in CSG. We want everybody to feel empowered. We want everybody to feel that their voice is heard. And we work very, very hard from a people strategy perspective to ensure that we have those motivated people. As you can expect in a business like CSG and many others like it, it's a balance. So trying to be kind of commercial growth and social value can often conflict. And actually, the people across CSG have a really important balance between those two things. We have a number of personnel in the group who care deeply about the sector and about the services that they provide, many of whom have come from the sector in the first place. We equally have a number of people who are very driven by growth, very driven by profits, and want to ensure that that is passed back into the sector as well. So empowered workforce is so important to us because ultimately it's our people that drive those services. But ultimately, yes, of course, we want happy customers. Of course, we want happy staff. Of course, we want to be growing a business that can have a bigger and bigger financial impact. But for us, the social and sustainable value promise is so, so important. It underpins everything. We want CSG's existence to be more than just a check. And we want the impact that we have on our various local economies, our various local communities across the country to have the greatest possible impact it can. I think that will take me to what will be my final slide, but I'll speak for a couple of minutes on this, if I may, before we move to Q&A, before I summarise and we move to Q&A. And this is how, in a single slide, we try to put together.
Hi, Kay, you're all right.
Yes, I'm good, thank you.
We try to put together what is CSG's strategic purpose and the so what question. Yes, they're a commercial organisation, but what's the difference between that and any other? And we categorise this into three places. And I'll start on the right-hand side and I'll move left. So firstly, which I mentioned a few times, there is a financial aspect. Of course there is. We're a commercial business, we drive revenue and therefore we drive surplus. And that surplus is delivered back to our partners and our shareholders. £67 million so far. I appreciate in some authorities that could be spent in a day, but it's better than it's an impact and it's better than being able to give nothing back. And actually every year now we're finding that our success is generating bigger and bigger returns for the sector. That does not just go to Kent. So obviously KCC are the majority shareholder and therefore take the majority of dividend, but any joint venture partner in CSG will enjoy dividend payments from those joint ventures as well. So this is a national impact and one that we're very, very proud to grow. And also, I guess the slightly less communicated and hopefully the day will never come, but important to know, is we are a commercial group and that comes with a value. So CSG is worth a lot of money. We're very, very proud to be part of the public sector. We're very, very proud to be owned by Kent County Council and supported by a number of other local authority joint venture partners. But actually the comfort that kind of money in the bank can give to them should the worst ever happen is really very important. So as well as the annual returns, obviously, the business itself is worth something or is worth a lot. And we kind of classify that as your savings in the bank versus the interest you're generating every year. And that's something, as we say, hopefully that day will never come. But the sector is not getting easier and it's a nice comfort blanket for the organisations to have later down the line. Outside of the finances, if I come to the middle part here, we would classify this as social value. So I've already mentioned that we directly employ 1,800 personnel. We directly work with about 14,000 supply chain partners, many of whom, particularly in the smaller and SME range, are quite heavily reliant on CSG's operation for their own existence. So we're very, very conscious of that impact, and we're very conscious of increasingly showing local support for our local businesses. So, for example, our joint venture with Hampshire is based in Basingstoke. Our joint venture with Surrey is based in Reigate. Our joint venture with Luton is based in Luton. So we will always look to have that local impact in wherever the partnership operates from. And outside of the joint venture programme in our general businesses, CSG does operate from 14 hubs across the UK. So we are putting back into those local communities on a number of levels. As you'd expect with a business of our size, we also have a wide range of internal work, of charity work, of social value forums and local community work that we're very, very proud of. And that's again led by our people and our empowered workforce promise. And then the third thing that we measure is ultimately what we would classify as let's call it customer experience, service provision. So yes, of course, we want to provide the most meaningful and the best possible service that we can to customers. But I think as a publicly owned organisation, what we can also promise is to do so in a very controlled way, in a very transparent way, in a highly compliant way. And if I extrapolate that to the extreme, like a joint venture model, those businesses are 50-50 operated. So local authority partners have the exact same level of visibility as CSG does. And as a privately run but publicly owned organisation, we're always incredibly conscious of that need for transparency and that need to be supporting the challenges with the financial position of the sector rather than making it worse. So just to summarise, as I said at the very beginning, this is an extremely high-level introduction. It's very difficult to try to explain CSG in 15 minutes, but hopefully there's a high-level understanding of who the business is. And then secondly, that kind of why, that wider purpose piece. As I say, we're very, very proud to deliver both financial, social value and service returns to the sector. We will continue to do so as best we can. And I think my message for today for everybody is, whether it's CSG or not, is to look at the value that local authority and public sector commercial organisations can offer. There are many of them. There are lots of expertise, and actually in the years to come, being able to keep as much of this expertise and cost within the public purse as possible will have the greatest possible impact. And we're very proud to lead that charge in the sector. So thank you very much for listening. I'll pass back to John now as chair and take any questions. Thank you very much.